My name is Stephanie Licata. I am the Senior Learning Strategist with Cloverleaf. My background is in organizational psychology, and I've worked with and alongside the learning function in many consultative experiences, but I've also worked in L&D in a large matrix organization, global organization. I've been in some of your shoes, and I'm excited to be here today and share this time with you. Alrighty, so today's topic is from expense to engine, using L&D as your company's competitive edge. So we're really here to talk about how do we transform how L&D is perceived, how it's leveraged, how we think about it, how stakeholders think about it, and how we can really help organizations leverage it as that competitive edge and see it as an investment in your biggest asset, your people. I think a lot of the data that's coming out in the endemic or post-pandemic really is capturing the impact of the past several years and how the workforce and the workplace has changed. And so I'm going to share some insights about that and how that really ties into our theme as well. All right, here's our question. If you could transform how L&D is positioned in your organization or in any organization, what's the one word you would want other people to use to describe L&D's purpose, right? So think about all the other people. What would you want them to describe L&D's purpose? The one word. What's the one word you would want other people to use to describe L&D's purpose if you really had a magic wand and could control all of that? We want to transform that understanding of L&D, but it takes something, right? And then sometimes it takes even breaking it down to help people understand. One of the biggest misconceptions about L&D is that L&D is just all about training. We're just supposed to create training and pump out training. And that's a common misconception. And if people haven't worked in our field before, sometimes that's what they've have experienced, right? Especially if they don't have an evolved L&D function. And so they may have a perception of what L&D is supposed to do, or if L&D has kind of been put off to the side or just kind of not join in with business, with stakeholders and business strategy conversations, right? If it lives on an island, that's, can be part of the problem. I thought that this LinkedIn workplace learning report was super interesting. And I loved the quote from the global head of learning and talent development from LinkedIn. Forward-thinking organizations need to create environments that embrace and unlock the potential of the whole employee. They have to create environments, right, that embrace and unlock the potential of the whole employee. And that takes L&D and it integrates it right into the culture, right? We have to create organizations, right, that create environments that express the intention. It is our intention to embrace and unlock the potential of the whole employee. People are not their roles. People are not their titles. People are not their skills. People are not their assessment results, right? They are whole human beings. And if we really want to connect with them and unlock their potential, we have to create that healthy work environment, that healthy culture first. So these are just some quick insights that I found that I think it's important. This is how we connect it back to sort of that competitive edge. And there was a big focus on skill development. So in this report, 89% of L&D pros agree that proactively building employee skills will help navigate the evolving future of work. So skills, right, those increased abilities to do certain things are going to give that competitive edge to navigate the evolving future of work. Now, you might think those skills are mastering AI. No, the top 4 skills that those L&D that most companies need from the same report, the 10 skills companies need most: management, communication, customer service, and leadership. None of that's even about technology. It's really all these human development skills. That's what's going to keep people competitive. That's what's going to create environments where we're unlocking the potential of the whole employee, right? So if we had all of our desires, we could invest tons of dollars in all of these things. But we know that sometimes L&D gets this sort of view as it's a cost center rather than this is an investment in us doing better, in us becoming more competitive and as an organization. right? And so when we really connect the employee experience, right, to the customer experience, we really want to make sure that that experience, that learning, that excellence is being passed on to the customer. We've got to invest here. And that's what's going to give organizations really that competitive edge and create that difference, right? That difference that I want to engage with that organization, or I want to work in that organization. I want to stay in that organization. I am so excited to introduce our panelists today. And our expert panel is made up of two phenomenal human beings who I know and have collaborated with in the past. So Kim Crean has an extensive career in learning, talent management, and leadership development, and moves effortlessly through organizations to mitigate gaps with strategic priorities, employee experience, and operational excellence through learning interventions. Kim focuses on the people, process, and technology to minimize chaos, define expectations, and create competency and confidence. She shares best practices for aligning learning and talent programs as a speaker and a panelist, as she is here doing with us today. Her career spans industries from finance, risk management, consulting, technology, and telecom. In her current role, Kim developed and implemented a multi-year L&D strategy encompassing leadership, new hires, and professional development. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, Steph.
Hi, so happy to have you here. Awesome. And I am also very excited to introduce Sotos Poulimenos of Global Talent Best Practices at Sun Life Financial Services. He also spent over 5 years as a senior consultant and manager with Deloitte in workforce transformation. He's a passionate talent management professional with a rich cross-industry experience and a track record for leading complex transformations. From full project lifecycle management to internal and external stakeholder management to team coaching and mentoring. He thrives in supporting organizations to lead significant transformations in their workforce, and workplace. Sotos holds a Master's of Organizational Psychology from Columbia University and an MSc in Project Management from Harrisburg University of Science and Technology. Welcome, Sotos.
Hi, Steph. Hi, Kim. Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
So exciting to be here. So we're going to get right into the panel discussion. And by the way, everyone who's listening, if as we're speaking, you do have a question that's related to the topic we're discussing, please feel free to pop it in the chat. So if something sparks in you that you want to discuss that, please feel free to do that. So I'm going to start with you, Kim. In your perspective, what's the single most effective strategy for learning and people strategy leaders to influence senior leaders to shift the perspective from viewing L&D as purely a cost center to an investment that drives innovation, productivity, and employee retention? So what's that effective strategy that learning and people leaders can use to influence senior leadership?
It's such a good question, right? So I think, first off, I want to go back to your other question, which is like, what's your word, right? So I think of that word, I think it was Theo that said partner, right? So the most effective strategy that I've had in any organization is challenging our leadership to consider L&D as their partner, right? So I consider it like a hub and spoke kind of situation. L&D being the hub and the spoke driving to all those various strategies, either business priorities or workforce transformations. So with that, one, I want to make sure I answered your question. And two, so let's go for that. Did I answer your question? Do I have
getting them to see? So how do you go about getting them to see L&D as a partner? Like, what do you need to do?
Well, typically what I've done in many organizations is I start on a listening tour of what do we currently have, and is there something that we can either repurpose, reuse, right? So that we can kind of move it forward. Currently, I'm at an organization where we have a huge investment in our L&D in our e-learning. And we're not using it in the way that we could be. So it's really like saying, here's what we can do. This is the time it's going to take for us to make that happen. And then these are the skills that we're going to get out of it. So really being able to have like that full, almost like training needs analysis of like, what is it that we need so that we can be engaged back with our senior leaders on we're not just a cost center.
Mhm.
We are here to support, but really partner with you on what you need today, what you
Mhm.
need for your future, and then also how to maintain that curiosity with employees. Because going back to the human centric, as humans, we're curious. We want to know, right? So we want to know, we want to be interested. So being able to like use those platforms to continue like to have that interest.
Yeah, and I
So
love what
with
you said
that,
on the listening. Yeah, the listening, just the understanding. You going in and listening, I think is great, and seeking to understand before implementing, which I think is super important. Awesome. Sotos, how about you? What's that strategy that you think is effective to help senior leaders sort of transform their perspective on L&D?
Indeed, Kim, yes, this is like a very loaded question, and there's no one answer, I think, right? Everything that Kim said, easily, 100% agree to. Business leaders keep asking us the same questions over the years. The questions that they're asking of the learning professionals are the same. They haven't changed. Are we getting good value from investment in training? We have multiple programs addressing the same learning need. Which one is most effective? How can I improve current learning and development programs? What additional learning support do I need for specific segments of my field? So these are the same questions that have always been asked of us. And I think the answer to these questions and how you bring people on board and how you make leaders understand the value that you bring as a learning professional, as a learning organization, is be able to answer these questions with data.
Hmm.
yep.
So my short answer is data, and I'm not talking about the data that are easy to measure, not the low-hanging fruit, completion, for those of us familiar with Kirkpatrick, like not the level 1 and level 2 data. How happy are you with the learning? How many completed? How many enrolled, right? These are easy to measure. We're talking about measurement of the things that really matter to businesses. So impact on behavior and job performance, impact on talent and organizational metrics, business result, direct impact on business results, and how do all these transform into kind of a cumulative ROI, right? So short answer, data. Long answer, I can keep going for like an hour.
Oh, that's great.
And if I may jump, what I'm thinking is if we flip the orthodoxy, because everybody says, oh, of course we need to have training, they say usually, right? Like we need to have training. So we have to come in and say, training is only part of learning. However, if we flip the orthodoxy and ask these business leaders who ask us to say, to explain to them why we're valuable, let's flip the question and say, what would you do if we were not here? Would you be in an organization that does not have a learning function? Do you know of any big organizations or medium or small organizations that have no learning function?
And actually, just to step in on that, that actually is a great point, because you can also have the conversation of, if I wasn't here, what would happen? Right? So if I wasn't here, what would happen? And how would our employees be effective? So then that way we can turn it and say, that's how we're going to get to the data. To get to the data that you need to make sure that we are on track for a good ROI, we need to one, agree on the metrics from the beginning, right? What does good look like? Right? What does success look like? Right? And that's not something that necessarily is driven by us. That is driven by the business, because success in sales and marketing may be more sales, but success in customer service, maybe time to task is much faster. It might be your job rules are very specific, right? So being able to flip that around and say, what do you, if I wasn't here, what would happen? Right? And get to those metrics that much quicker so that we can then tell the data story. But I love that, Sotos. The data story is critical.
No, and I'm going to stick on the related topic around technology, right? And like Soto said it, and it's not that it's just training, right? So how can technology, including e-learning platforms, AI, and data analytics, how can it revolutionize L&D, making it more efficient, personalized, and results driven. So why don't we start with you on that, Sotos?
This is another great question. So the first thing that I will say when we talk about technology is that what we know today of the technological landscape of the ecosystem of technologies that surround learning and development is perhaps 5 to 10% of what will be around in 5 to 7 years from today, right? So these things keep evolving. So thinking of what we know today of technology, right, with AI and Gen AI being kind of a key player into the future, but in ways that not all of us kind of like think of, like my business leaders think that Gen AI, for example, will kind of like replace the need for an instructor or whatever. You know, like these are kind of same as like that famous recording when the internet became a thing with Steve Jobs and what's his name, like the famous, the very popular host, American host, who invited him and said, but why do I need the internet to watch the results if I can have it on the radio, right, of the sports results. Right? It's the similar situation here where, like, we have AI. It's not going to replace everything. It's going to enhance what we do. So again, back to your question, how can technology help us? I think insights is the key word here. And this is exactly why I'm saying that the human element will always be part of the equation and will be a critical part of the equation. We're never going to have a learning and development process or environment or journey without the human element at minimum moderating, right? What we see from the data. But then we're talking about technology for adaptive learning, tailoring, like creating journeys based on skills taxonomies that the organizations have and assessments that indicate where these skills are in the organization, right? Career progression wise, how can we enable this entire employee experience through the life cycle, right? And learning and development is not the driver of this, it's just one of the levers. And Kim, you talked about it earlier, right? How can we make learning and development a crucial part of this transformation that we're looking for? How can we be one of the levers that is definitely being pulled when it comes to enabling through technology? That's kind of like how I'm thinking about it. Does that answer, Kim?
Yeah, no,
Does it make sense?
absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm gonna riff on that a bit, and I think of it from technology. It's a good point, like a point at need, right? So technology, AI can really drive the I need this now, right? So I'm looking up, in the industry that I'm in, telecommunications, we get new systems consistently, we get, new platforms, etc. So we have to have a point in need, right? It's not it isn't effective to say, okay, 6 months from now, I'm going to put 20 people in a class that's going to have, certification. It's like, we need to know how Google Cloud Platform works today. And we have to figure out how to make that happen in the next, 3 days. So for us, it's like being able to reach out to that technology, get that information, and then give it as a point in need. Right. And then that way you can also manage against, like, when you're thinking about leadership training, you're thinking about management training, where are people at? Or what are they searching? So if you can focus on, okay, so now we have the data that we have 300 people in our organization that are searching for, email writing skills, or they're searching for time management. Hey, maybe that's an intervention that we need to take more seriously. And there needs to be something that's maybe kind of driven in terms of our expectations, right? It's something that we can communicate out that as an employee of X company, we expect you to XYZ. And then and just having, one, the data, but two, the information at point of need is just so critical. And I think that that's where our competitive edge is being able to utilize both the data and the content that is out there that we're just trying to harness.
No, I think that's great. And there's Kim just shared, our Kim in our audience just shared a related point around effective implementation of any significant change initiative, whether within a business or as part of a change transformation project, hinges on the establishment of competent and collaborative relationships among change leaders. Success in such endeavors is interdependent, with training playing a pivotal role in fostering adoption and ensuring project success. So that really, positions the learning function and the training piece as a glue, right, of how we're going to progress together, right, and how we're going to support that. And that really that has an answer to the what would you do if we weren't here, right?
Right.
Those change initiatives would be an absolute mess, and change is messy anyway to begin with. But if you didn't have that support, that glue holding it together, there'd be an issue. Okay, so great conversation around technology. Question to ask: what's an effective process you've used or been a part of that helps organizations to align L&D with business strategy? And this kind of goes along to what Theo was bringing up before. So what's an effective process you have used or been a part of that has helped that sort of marriage of L&D with business strategy? So why don't we start with you on that, Kim?
So I have formerly, like in the introduction, Steph spoke about all of the different areas of the world that I worked in, all the different industries I worked in, and I worked in manufacturing at one point. And we had a situation where we had inconsistent onboarding for a lower level role that had some like safety issues around it. And there was high turnover, and it was hard to hire for the role. And in the inconsistent onboarding, we might have someone who would be in onboarding for 8 weeks, and we might have someone who'd be in there for 6 months, just depending on what plant they were in. So, when you go back to the question about the effective process that aligns L&D with business strategy, well, we looked at like really job coding, right? So we looked at like, what are the job, what's the responsibility, what is the basic for this particular job, which is kind of our lowest level, like, but our highest volume. And then actually working with our knowledge experts to compile what those tasks were. So we took it back to almost like American military, right? So where it's like task driven, what's specific for this particular plant versus another. And then, so doing that job role analysis. And then and what that did is, because the business strategy was really about, we wanted to be safe, right? So we wanted to have, zero safety or health and environmental safety issues, right? We wanted to be effective, and we wanted to treat our employees with care. Those were the three kind of like targets that we were focused on. So we realized we weren't treating our employees with care if they were sitting in onboarding, or they were, job shadowing for 6 months. Right? That doesn't give anyone the ability to feel like they're good in their job. So being able to align back to that and say, okay, so we're very clear on the business strategy. We're also very clear on the skill build that they need and the knowledge that they need, because we've documented this. What it did is we were able to make a simple shift when new technology came on board, because we had our tasks built out, because we had the learning platform, right? Just the way in which we engage. And then we also were able to create. Now in manufacturing, I mean, obviously there's various different roles, but typically you go from an individual contributor to some kind of team lead to maybe a supervisor and to a manager. This actually created another path for someone who didn't want to manage people, but had a lot of knowledge to share. So what that did, again, brings it around to engagement, which again, we care for our people. So it was a long-winded answer to say, we wrote stuff down. We made sure that we had the right skills and the right people delivering it, and that aligned right back to our business strategy.
And that's really what as you were speaking, I was hearing that word partner, right? Of really acting as a partner, aligning with that strategy, and then taking the steps necessary to create that environment.
Exactly.
So how about you?
Yes to everything. And yeah, I mean, that's the key part, Steph. What you said makes sense, right? It's the partnership that you need to have. So we're asking about an effective process, right? That we use. The process can be perfect, right? It can be the most effective process ever created. If you don't have the right seat at the table, if you're not a true strategic partner to the business, your process doesn't matter, right? So kind of process, usually we say a process is what defines the culture, but it's the other way around. A
Mhm.
process is reflective of what the culture is. And if
Mhm.
your organization has a culture of learning, then yeah, for sure, learning will be ongoing learning and ongoing development. Learning will be a strategic partner. So I would that's my bigger answer with regards to kind of like process versus culture. So I would say look at the culture first, make sure that the culture is aware of itself, right? We know where
Yeah.
we are with regards to culture. We know where we want to go, and then this will drive how effective our processes are going to be. Now, from a process perspective, everything, Kim, that you said makes sense. Documentation is critical. Identify the key business objectives and skill gaps in the beginning. So know your today, then do kind of like these visioning exercises that align with the business vision for the future, and then identify what the gaps are, for us to start kind of like bridging them with different types of interventions. So the process, I would say, is pretty much the same no matter where you are, right? When you're a learning professional, what really matters is that you're at the table at the right time with the right people and you have a say.
Right. No, and that's great. And if anyone in the audience also wants to share, who's joining us today, wants to share a strategy that, kind of reflects what Sotos and or riffs off of what Sotos and Kim are saying, please feel free to pop it in the chat and I will be happy to share it with everyone. So I love what you said, Sotos, about that seat at the table, right? And that really is about the relationship that we build, right? And so, as L&D leaders, you need to be bridge builders, right? And you have to build as many bridges as you can all across the organization to create that exchange, right? Or to create that relationship. Theo said he agrees the seat at the table is key. And sometimes you can't always control, right? The seat at the table, right? And so you've got to find the inroads, right? You might know somebody else who can help you get the seat at the table, right? So that's really about networking across the organization, building those relationships. Sometimes you have to build the relationship that gets you to the right relationship, right?
Sure.
And those are, key things, for learning leaders to know and to leverage and to not give up hope, right? Oh, well, nobody listens to us. Oh, well, we're never going to get that seat, right? Sometimes you have to build the case, right? It's, none of us chose this path because it was just always easy to do, right? We like challenges, we like to tackle challenges. So Sotos, I'm going to start this one with you. Oh, we have Kim shared, integrating L&D into the decision-making processes of a business is essential for ensuring that learning initiatives are not isolated, but are instead integral to the overall strategy and success of the organization. Absolutely, right? We don't want L&D to be this island. We don't want it to be this silo that people just come to like dispense like a vending machine. Give me a training for this, right? We want that connection.
Right. I think, and actually, you bring up a great point, Kim. I mean, one of the things that I do is when you're looking at any kind of initiative, it's like, okay, we've heard that we need this. We've identified what it is that we want to do, and then we start aligning back. Okay, at this level, is it what we really need? Okay, so VPs think that the directors need this, and the directors think that, but we go down further into the organization and say, is that really the case? So I look at it as like a lot of times we're being detectives for what the true need is, right?
Mm.
And then and then the opposite end of it is building those champions, like you spoke of, right? So I want to be able to sit at the table, or I want to have L&D's voice heard. But so I have to build those champions. But at the same time, I also want to bring to those champions and challenge them and say, hey, you say everyone needs management training. And I say most managers have 30 years experience. What are we training them on? And really being able to like have that conversation and say, okay, so here's a skill, or
Right.
here's a behavior, or here's a competency.
And, and also, I love it. And also be courageous enough as a learning professional to say, learning is not your answer here. Your
Yeah.
problem is not learning. Your problem is not training. Here's how I can help you solve
Right.
for the problems that I'm identifying. But training and learning is not the answer to everything,
Absolutely.
right? It's
The
just one of
most
the levers.
Yeah.
Exactly. The most powerful question you can ask any senior leader is, what is the problem we're solving?
Right. Absolutely.
And if they can answer, what is the problem we're solving for, that at least gives you a directional,
Yeah.
right? And that allows you then to take that next step. I
Right.
love it, Sotos. I love it.
Right. And Stacy said, Amen. Learning isn't always the problem. Sometimes you have the wrong people in roles.
Oh,
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
don't. Yeah. I think everybody on this call is like right now is rolling there. I was like, oh God.
Just a couple of thoughts also that I think are great to highlight. Theo shared, Stacy shared #facts. Theo said, in order to get the seat at the table, I found it easy to get buy-in if I could speak or understand the business. Therefore, business acumen helps, right? And that is so
100%.
like, I've worked in a lot of industries as well. And understanding how the business works, what's its purpose, even if I don't understand every single aspect of the business, is super helpful, right? So when I was doing L&D for like a pharmaceutical consulting company, had a clinical side and a commercial side, and the clinical side was operated completely different than the commercial side. They were just two completely different animals, right? But I had to really understand deeply, because I was designing training for both these audiences, and I had to just understand deeply how they functioned, right? And so I spent time with marketing, and I spent time with some of the clinicians to really understand what their needs were, and what the different learning agendas would mean, what that would mean for the learning agendas that I was designing.
yeah. And a lot of times what happens is learning isn't necessarily a function of like HR, right? So I've been in, Sotos, would you agree?
We need to grab drinks.
Yeah. So because and I'm sure that some of the people that are on this webinar right now are saying like, hey, that's great, the like learning in HR, but I'm sitting over here and I'm in operational learning, or I'm sitting
Mm.
over here and I'm in sales and marketing, or and so being, having a seat at the table isn't always about the big table. It's about like who's in your business, right? And then also, and this is critical in the role that I'm in right now, I have what I call learning partners. I have peers that have a similar function as me that are deep in the business. And so they are my eyes and ears, and we are little detectives about where else can we pull information so that we can get a whole picture, so that it doesn't seem like we're doing management training and we're doing sales training and we're doing this training, that it actually ends up having a full narrative. So again, going back to building relationships.
Yeah, and that's that integration, right, that we're hoping for. And Kim and our audience shared, without that representation, L&D also can be vulnerable to, layoffs and to budget cuts,
Yeah.
and leading to a loss of both financial resources and perceived org value, right? And so, we saw that at the beginning of the pandemic. I was working on my own as, a trainer, and all of a sudden everything stopped, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, oh, we're not going to do any of that right now. Right. So, and then, obviously slowly but surely things came back, because they found the new normal of how we were going to work, and people still needed training. Human beings still needed skills, right? Even if they were working from home. So, and then there was a new set of skills that they needed: how to work remotely, how to work in a dispersed team, all of that, right? There was a whole new set of training needs, right, that needed to be addressed, and that are still being addressed as the workforce has shifted. So, Sotos, I'm going to send this question to you to start. Share personally about how L&D helped your organizations, how, I guess, your function helps your organization stay agile and responsive in the face of market changes, economic shifts, and technological disruption. So how have you stayed agile?
This is a very rich one too. I will start by saying that I wish organizations in general, including mine, leveraged learning and development, or in talent development, whatever you want to call it, more in situations like what we're going on through today, or we went through during the pandemic. This is the time, in times of crisis, learning and development, people development is where you double down. It's not what you kind of like
Mhm.
freeze, right? Again, there's a whole culture and a whole system behind why would organizations just freeze everything when crisis comes instead of kind of like double down on it. Personally, I will say that I won't speak about my current employer for reasons of confidentiality, but I will speak of a previous engagement that I had very recent before I started with. It was one of the big refineries here in Canada in the Northwest. And their leaders, their operations leaders, came to us and said, "Hey, we need training because our people are not engaged." Right? Sit with this statement for a minute and try to not react to it in an unprofessional way, right? So it's it's challenging. However, here's what we did. We went there, of course, with a learning and development versus training aspect approach. And then we started figuring out as we went, build the plane as you fly it. They were like, oh, we need training for managers because they're not managing the front line. Oh, we need, like safety moments training. Kim, like you reminded me, safety moment trainings because people are kind of like going in there without their equipment, blah, 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 blah. We went into focus groups. We went into interviews. We did not do surveys. We took people off-site. We brought frontline workers off-site to kind of disconnect them from the environment and make sure that they understand that this is absolutely confidential. This is just us and you. Your name is not going to be connected to it, right? So tell us what's really wrong.
Mm.
Why why are your leaders telling us that you need training, right? The whole thing ended up being at a very high level toxic management practices. And it ties to Steph, what you showed us in the beginning, like
Mhm.
the four top of the 10, like top four from LinkedIn Learning, the number one is management. How do you manage people? So someone mentioned, and that's why I was like, oh my God, these folks are speaking my language here. Just because you're an expert SME, just because you're an expert in a process does not mean that you make a good people leader. Does not mean that you're a good teacher, let alone a people leader. So we see a lot, and because that's the natural way of things, right? Kim, you were alluding to it earlier. You said, you start as a individual contributor, and then what's the natural way up? Oh, you get a team. Wait a minute, wait a minute. Wait.
Yeah.
This person is like, I don't know, like I look at leaders all the time, and I'm like, how did you get there? And then I look at their teams, and I'm like, yep, your team seems to agree, right? So that's kind of like, is it an answer or is it a non-answer or did I take it somewhere else? I think I took it somewhere else. I think to stay agile and responsive when the market changes, when economic shifts and technology comes on and changes everything. L&D again can be this kind of like this seed that you plant, and then you need to make sure that you're creating the right environment around it for this seed to sprout and flourish and turn into a tree over time, not tomorrow. We're not in the business of, we are partially in the business of teaching people how to click the right button in the front line, right? And that's easy to measure, how many errors you get, how many, et cetera, et cetera. But that's just one tiny little part of what learning and development does. And that's the training part mostly. When we really talk about learning and development, we're talking about this differentiated employee experience, the career, the career talent life cycle, and how do we become like a permanent fixture, if that's the right way to say it, to this journey. That's how you stay agile. Because if you're really listening, if you really have your learning people in the right positions, you will always be able, Steph, to bridge
Right.
those gaps. You will have insights that will help you bridge the gaps and be proactive instead of reactive when it comes to these changes that are coming up about.
And I just love your approach. I love how you said we didn't do a survey, because I think the second thing people think after training is, well, we'll do a survey, right?
Mhm.
So I love that you actually had conversations with people, right? And doing those in-depth interviews with people, and and I realized that it takes some of the anonymity away from the initial transaction because you can see them. But, in keeping that confidentiality and really understanding and listening and using your own emotional intelligence to see what's really happening here. I love the approach that you took. And I think, and then you answered the question that Kim said, what's the actual problem we're trying to solve? You found out it was a different problem, right? So super interesting. So Kim, can you share an example similarly of how L&D has helped your organization stay agile and responsive in the face of market changes, economic shifts, technological disruptions? And you can share about a previous organization as well.
Okay. Well, as Soto was talking, I was like, I don't want to go back to manufacturing. So I'm going to go back further. I'm going to go back to when I was in management consulting. And I'm going to tell you a story and we're going to get there. Okay. So there I am sitting in, no joke, the Mediterranean. I am on a global conference where we are in Mallorca. And I have, I think, over 30 investigators and case managers. And my friend and mentor is looking at his BlackBerry. That's how long ago it was. He was looking at his BlackBerry and he is like, we are all going to be fired. And I'm like, we're all going to lose our jobs. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because we had years of just like living off the fatted calf, right? We had traveled all over the world. We had done all of these different conferences, all of this different training. And it was the beginning of the financial collapse. And, and there I am, like, what's the next thing that needs to happen? I was a little young in my career, didn't really understand exactly what it meant. When I got back to the States a couple of days later, I started working with my mentor on what do we need to do to shore up our people? Because being in management consulting, we did a lot of like due diligence, right? So we did, so if companies aren't purchasing, buying, or selling each other, guess what? We're kind of out of work. So we looked at creating, again, that job, that skill, that what do we need to do? What will happen once the financial collapse really, really happens? And what we looked at is we identified roles that had they were similar. So we had a group that was in accounting and we had another group that was in investigation, and they were cross-functional. And so we were able to kind of train up on either side for that. So rather than getting into like the deep details of it, we were able to, again, do a hub and spoke and say, okay, if L&D is responsible for making sure that our employees are cross-trained so that they can continue to be billable, so that they can continue to be effective, and so that they can continue to grow in their career, we're going to be able to retain them for as long as we can, right? And also grow the business. And so that is what we did. I mean, again, it was 2008. It was a really rough time, but we were able to save as many jobs as we could because we were able to pivot so quickly and have that and identify those skills that were transferable. And the interesting thing is they were all human skills, right? We're talking communication. We're talking, to be quite honest, I mean, there's some in there like, report writing or, investigative, kind of conversations and interviewing skills. But when we're really talking about like, people, and then being able to pick up the phone and say, are you doing okay? Is there anything I can help you with? And teaching investigators to ask that question in a different way than I'm using you as a source I'm now using you as a business opportunity, that actually ended up growing the business.
That's awesome. I mean, and so many, in that time, and, which we know history repeats itself, right? So in that time, there was so much upheaval across industries that you were able to do that is probably, slightly miraculous.
I mean, it worked out really well, I mean, and again, all joking aside, unfortunately, in L&D, you tend to be the one that goes when things like that happen. So what you do, and I took a class a long time ago, which is leave it better than you got it. So it was like, that's what I did with that organization. I left it in a better place because I was able to move on from it. And they're still doing that kind of cross training at that organization. So I have a legacy.
Let's make sure that whatever we do from a learning and development perspective, of course, is aligned with the business. Of course, supports the goals, but put the learner in the center. Know your audience, know the situation, know what they like, what they don't like. Ask them directly versus just assume that their leaders know. And the last thing that I will say is let's all agree on this call to stop calling soft skills, because I have like a big pride, and thank you, Kim, for like kind of like calling that out. When I hear soft skills, I'm like, oh yeah, let's see where you would be without your soft skills, right? So it's like that. Like I like to call them enduring human capabilities back from my consulting days, right? These are the things that you need to operate as a good human being, regardless of what you do at home, at work, anywhere. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about, learner centricity and how to change your organization with a transformational force of learning.
I love it.
Thank you.
I love it. So my parting words are, anytime I'm looking at a new initiative, I have to consider these three things. People want to be great in their job, right? They want to know what they need to do today. They want to know how they need to do it. So they want to have that confidence and that competence. Okay. Second thing, people are curious. They want to grow in their career. They want to grow in their capability or their skills. They want to understand the business, or they want to understand how we all work together. And then the last one is that people like to communicate, right? So if you can figure out a way to hit on those three things, that will always have you retain people in your organizations. If you can give them, this is how you're going to be good today, this is how you can be great tomorrow, and this is how we're going to tell the story, I really think that is the key to any learning program. So
Awesome.
Beautiful.
and with that, thank you.
Oh, no, thank you both so much. Your collective diverse experience and background has really made for a really rich conversation today. I do want to thank absolutely everyone who gave up their time to join us. I know that your time is precious and your biggest commodity. So thank you for taking the time to spend time with us and discuss. We really appreciate that. We at Cloverleaf are just committed and really compelled, right, to really support and create workplaces that work for everyone.